Games, board games we might be talking about. Board games, but we're not gonna shout. We are talking about knowledge and how we can try to not demolish the ways that we do things, but we'll build it up. And hopefully, this will build you up. We're going to talk about building a knowledge base. Here is Adam with a. Here is Ad Best with a picture of their face. Hello, Ad. It's 10 a.m. UK time for Busy Beats and Board Game Blether, episodes number 927, where we're going to talk about the best practices for game gatherings. And you haven't used this term yourself, best practices, but when we're talking about best practices, an established term, I must admit, who better to have it than Ad Best?
Yeah, it's always aware of the horrible pun with my surname, so I try not to use best practices. I'm also aware that every club is different. We try extremely hard, and I don't want people to think that when I make a list of stuff that we do, that they have to do all of it, and if they don't, they fail. So I'm always a case of, here's a bunch of fun stuff that will make your lives easier, your guests' experiences nicer. Do some of it. Just do a little bit of it if you can. But I know I said we go over the top on a lot of this stuff because it's so important to us.
I think this is a key thing that everything's different for everyone, everything's different for every community. And I think the most important thing is to look at this stuff and then think, does this apply to me? But use your own critical thinking. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Or actually, my situation, that doesn't quite work, but I can take the concept of talking about pronouns and we'll do it this way instead, for example.
Mm-mm. Um, Now, before we get into, I wanted to have you on because you'd sent me a really nice thing about allyship, which I really appreciated. And I thought it would be really great to share this with people, some of the information that you've got to run through it and what this all means, and how, well, firstly, what some of this advice is, let's call it advice, and secondly, why you went around building up this knowledge base and what it might look like in the future. But before we get into all of that, I would like to ask you to share some of your recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. So what have you been up to recently? What's been the last game that you've played?
Oh, the last game that we played was Growl, which is a one night werewolf style game, but slightly different, where you don't have to pretend too much, and there's no like
Mm-mm.
movement in the cards. This is a very silly, light one, and
Yeah, I played that a few times myself recently, just 8 days ago.
and
It's a
and
lot of fun, and I think it's one of those where you have to trust everyone to be kind. I mean, whilst you can lie in the game, it's easy to cheat. Like, as soon as you get free werewolf cards, you are the werewolf,
yeah,
and you need to have people that understand the rules and are going to get it correct. And I think the rules are simple enough that people can do that.
yes. And the other thing I'm proud of, I've nearly finished Gloomhaven.
Oh,
This is my
wow.
third attempt in person, which we got through to about very close to the end, like 45, 50 missions in about 2 years ago in the pandemic, and then we stopped. And then I did an online campaign and we got to about mission 30. But I'm currently playing with someone else who doesn't really sleep very much. So we'll be playing from like 10 o'clock to like 2 in the morning. And I think we're 4 missions from the end with one side quest left to undo. And the Steam adaptation is brilliant. It is fantastic, just the
That
way they've
boggles
implemented
my
it.
mind. So you've basically played through the first 30 missions 3 times.
There's some branching quests, so I haven't necessarily done all of them. And what I like about Gloomhaven is the characters. The only difference is that you have a small deck of cards, say 16 cards, of which you might
Mm-mm.
carry forward 10, and you have a perk deck, which is like your combat modifiers. That's the only difference between the characters, and they feel utterly different. So right now I've got and I won't know any spoilers, but a healer can only heal point blank because he's mundane rather than magical. I've had another character who could go invisible and teleport, and depending on which are in your party, some of the missions are completely trivial, and other the missions are truly impossible. Because if you've got a bunch of slow pokes, you can't run across a map without being beaten down. It's one of my favorite games, but
But then
unfortunately,
parts of the game is in understanding this and then coming back when you've got a different mix of
yeah,
characters.
absolutely. It's yeah, I do have Frosthaven, but I'm like now tempted just to sell it and wait until the Steam version comes out because I know I'll finish it. And I know one of our group really wants the physical copy, so that's a win-win. I'll just probably sell it on at cost price rather than gouge, and then that's two people happy.
Well, that sounds like lots of fun. I've heard so much good about Gloomhaven from those people who've fallen in love with it, but I've never met someone who's actually played through quite as much of it as I think you seem to have done.
It's definitely replayable because the same mission with different, because we said the same mission with different characters, you could have a lot of fun with. So if you had the time, you could certainly go for the campaign twice, do it good, do it evil. And there's at least one point where there's 3 branching quests, so you'll still have some surprises.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, I think it deserves the credit of being one of the best games made because it is so well done, so clever, and there's obviously a huge amount of maths when has gone into it to make it balanced.
And presumably you're looking forward to Frosthaven being gone away.
Yeah, that will be on Steam. I think I'll just wait for a bit and buy it
Oh,
digitally.
okay, so you're not going to go with the physical original version.
No, it won't get played.
That's totally fair. I myself went to a lovely day yesterday. I went into the pub and we started off with a game of Root. Have you played Root?
Played it once. I have the Kickstarter on my shelf, still in shrink, and we're debating of whether again that's like it's been on my shelf for 2 years. Do I just sell it? It was a really interesting game.
I mean, I think it's fascinating, and it is one that I think there's three things that you have to understand as a player. Firstly, your stuff will get demolished, and if you build buildings, they will get thrown off the board. If you make troops, they will get defeated. If you are building up quests and items as a vagabond, there's a chance that someone will come in and smack you, and then eventually you won't be able to hold all the things that you're holding, and you'll have to get rid of stuff. So there is the potential for those feel bad moments. Secondly, yes, I think the complexity of the game is slightly overblown, but the reason that people talk about the great complexity is that, yeah, whilst it's not the most asymmetric game out there, I mean, certainly without blowing my own trumpet, Yogi Stock Guru, where some people are playing a bidding game and some people are contorting, and that's a lot more asymmetric than here, where everybody is ultimately rolling dice and playing a strategic turn-based game. And but within that framework of strategic, complex, relatively thinky games, every faction is totally different. You've got to get to 30 points, and getting rid of cardboard gets you the points. But we played with the rats who are trying to dominate the map. We played with the birds, the Irie, who are building up this engine, and they build up not only the potential of what to do each turn, but also an obligation of what to do on future turns. We played with the moles who have so many pieces going on, and you summon this minister and this minister, each of which gives you a special ability, which grows as the game goes on. And I was the vagabond, the little owl, and in the end, it was the person in the blue shirts who won with the moles. As the vagabond, I felt slightly out of it, I'm not going to lie, but it was so much fun. And seeing how the factions interact with each other, even in a two-player game, if you play the same faction but against someone else, even if you play the same faction but against, everyone else is just playing slightly differently, the game will turn out so differently because it's so player dependent, and it's not just what you play but also the context of it, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. It's why I haven't sold it yet. I love asymmetrical games. Just you have so much more discovery. I think in some way I enjoy discovering games, not more
Mm-mm.
than, but as much as playing and perfecting games. I love seeing them for the first time, seeing everything about them, how they're designed, how the box insert works, how the rules are written, and just getting my head around how the game unfolds. And and I would happily play a game. I want to play it a few times to know it, but then I'd happily move on to a new one to see what's next, what's new, what's
Mm-mm.
different in this one.
And it does definitely remind me of that, because if you've got one expansion, then you've got 6 factions, and I think each faction will take you 2 or 3 plays before you feel like, okay, I know this comfortably, and now I'll maybe try another one, and I'll maybe try another one. And parts of me does think that if they ever said, you know what, that's it, there's no more root factions ever, I think there would be a bit of sadness. I think that it shows in the fact that there's hundreds of fan factions that have been created. People love the idea that it can keep building up. It's kind of like a deck construction game where the constant evolution of the game is part of it within the same broad framework. And although we haven't quite organized what is going to happen around the Mega May charity event, if you are able to take the day off and take some time off, I would love to play a couple of games with you and Elaine if you're up for that.
Yes, definitely. We've got the Monday off to unpack, but that hopefully won't take all day. Yeah, I don't think I'll style read. I'm definitely going to keep it because I also love animal themes. I know it's a little bit abstract, but it's still sort of cute animals, and I'm a sucker for that.
There's also 2 other games that I want to mention. Firstly, I just want to say it was an absolute delight. I'd brought along some of my own games in a wee box, and at some point, Kerry asked, "Hey, do you mind if we borrow Yogi?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And of course, it was a delight to see people having joy with something I made without me pressuring them into it. Because at a convention, yes, they have fun with it, but part of me is like, "Oh, is this just because I'm there that they're like, do you know what I mean?"
Yeah,
Whereas if someone of their own volition sees a table with a whole bunch of other games that they could play and says, you know what, this is the one that I want to go with, that's really lovely to see. There was a lovely group of people around, and we did play this game, which is a game about auctioning cubes after winning an auction to become the auctioneer. And although you can't tell much from this title, this is definitely going to be officially released at UK Games Expo, although I'm planning to get everything printed a little bit early so that I can give early copies to my volunteers to learn, and also have some early previews at the Here for Games Mega May charity event again.
that'd be
And
very cool.
this is one where you've got a blind auction to become the auctioneer, and the auctioneer gets hopefully some income, whereas the person who wins the cubes is the person who then, yeah, actually potentially has more chance of getting points. And yeah, there's me with the owl. That was lovely. And finally, Calico. Have you played this one?
No, I haven't.
This was compared to Cascadia, and I will say that whilst it's a similar sort of thinky puzzle, I would say that it's not quite got the variability that Cascadia has. And also, Cascadia feels a little bit friendlier because Cascadia, you can go out in whichever way, and the drafting with, okay, you're picking one of these and one of the other, it feels marginally more involved. Now, conversely, in Calico, it feels slightly tighter. There's fundamentally 3 ways to score. Either you've got these 3 central tiles, which, yes, they do vary, but either you've got, okay, for example, AA, BB, CC, that means that if you've got 2 of 3 different colors, you get some points. If you've got 2 of 3 different patterns, you get some points. And if you've got 2 of both, you get even more points. And everything can work with patterns or colors. And ideally, you want to be doing both. And at some points, you just give up. For example, the none of these can be identical. I managed to start off my game with that, and then managed to get the full 15 points for doing both the patterns and the colors. The second way to score is if you've got 3 of a single color in a go, then you get one of these lovely tiles and you get 3 bonus points for that. And then the third way to score is the cats, which focus on the patterns, and some of them might want 3 in a line, some of them might want 5 that are connected any which way, some of them might want 4 any which way, and it, how can I put this? It does add some variety, but it still feels like a more constrained, tighter puzzle. And so, if you like that, then this is one to look out for. If you like the idea of, yeah, I feel bad kind of comparing them because they're both great games, and it doesn't have to be either one or the other. But no, it's a lovely thing. And as you can see here, the scores were so close. I mean, the top 3 people, there was only 2 points between them.
That's normally a sign of a good game, isn't it? When you feel like you can win.
Yes, and I will say that there's a good amount of player interaction with the drafting of, oh, I really wanted that. My one reservation is because there's only one thing coming in each turn, if you're not sure which one you really want at a certain point, which then you might just take the latest one. So it's maybe slightly overly easy to spite people, I feel. But that's again just my taste. If you feel like you'd rather have it less easy, then maybe not a game for you. But it is, despite all of that, a brilliant thing. And speaking of brilliant things, what would you like to nominate as the brilliant thing? Brilliant thing. What's the little thing which is brilliant?
I think I'm going to echo what Mark Cook and Aircon said today. It's how it's a wonderful community we have, and everyone is keen. Not quite everyone, that's a bit exaggeration, but the vast majority of people are out to help other people in the industry. There's no level of horrible competition. It's, I think, just the community itself, from the gamers up to the organisers and the publishers, are just wonderful. And that's a massive little thing, I know.
Absolutely. And I think that definitely everyone's working together. And I think that I don't want to say board games are unique in this, but I do think that it happens more in entertainment communities, whether it's board games or dancing, things that are inherently social and inherently about bringing joy to others.
That makes sense.
Um, and of course, another brilliant thing is knowledge. And one thing that and I'd like to remind people out there, as always, to comment, ask questions from like follow. If you do have any comments or questions, I do always try to reply to all the respectful stuff, even if it's after the fact. And if I've not replied in a while, then please feel free to ping me because there's always a chance that I might have missed it because of the weird notification system somewhere. But just put it at the bottom of the video and I will see. Now, there was a question about knowledge and wisdom. I mean, wisdom feels like we understand what to act on. Wisdom feels like we're able to take the knowledge of someone else and discern whether it applies to us or not. As you said at the start, it's different for everyone. So, how can we really look at your knowledge base and analyze whether it's for us? Do you have any tips for that and the separation of the 2 words, or am I completely off base here?
No, it's a fair analysis. So it's at the bottom, you've just got raw data. You're looking at all the signs. You're looking at people walking into your room, and then you start to categorize that. Like, are people happy? And then you can start to pull out a few little groups of data, knowledge, and then hopefully you can actually give some actions. I think for me, knowledge is knowing you have a problem, or knowing there's a pattern, or knowing something's wrong, and then if you put onto it something actionable you can do, a change that you could make, then it becomes wisdom. Okay, we have a problem with some people, just use a quick example, being misgendered. How can we promote the sort of normalization of pronouns? And an example might be name badges, or at the start of a large social introduction game like Blood in the Clock Tower, you just go around the table, and there is no table normally, around the circle of chairs, and then do your name and your pronoun as an introduction. So that would be an action that you could take if you felt like you needed it. The question of how do you know what you need, I'm hoping people have enough awareness to have got through the first stages of roughly being aware that there's a problem, working their way up and going, I'm not sure the best way to solve this. I've got 3 or 4 ideas. What have other people done? And then you can look at the list and go, actually, that one suits me. Inversely, if you look at the list and go, I don't think we have a problem, take a moment and actually go back to the beginning of the process and go, and let me look at my club and my community and actually see if I have any of these things going on. And then maybe you revisit the guide in a couple of months, go, actually, that one actually does make sense to me. Now I've taken the wisdom of that could be a problem and looked at my own setting, I would like to action that.
Mm-mm.
So hopefully, if you read some of the guides on accessibility and you think you have no issues, read them again and just watch your own community for a month or 2.
I think that's a great point. You have to be open to change because nothing is perfect and we can all grow. And I think that step one is accepting that A, we are not perfect. B, that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means we have room for growth. And C, if you're organizing a group gathering, a community, well, you've got a bit more responsibility, I feel, than if your life is mainly just in one-to-one scenarios. I mean, if you're taking a position of leadership, organizing a game group is kind of a position of leadership, if only
Definitely.
for those nights. And you have to be really mindful. And I do want to say quickly hello to Alex. And I actually suggested, I think, Herefordshire Games. But I think the actual website Hereford Games is better.
We have registered here for Hereford.games as well, in case people do a typo. We spend quite a lot of money on URLs because I like registering the common misspellings. That's one of our biggest bills each year is the 8 or 9 URLs we own across the different websites. And as a note, we have 6 different websites as well, which is just gone a bit weird, but it's very useful. That's an I may as well continue. That's an accessibility thing. If you have one website which is trying to serve 4 purposes, it will get bloated and busy and hard to use. So if you have a very dedicated task, like a library of things to borrow or a library of articles to read, or just here's a convention you're interested in my opinion, because I can make websites, okay websites, I make a new website. So you log on, I'm interested in a convention, here's all the data on the convention. I'm interested in borrowing something from the library, here's a library website. And that's why I've spun off some of the new things into their own area to make it easier, to make it more accessible.
And
But it also
frankly,
does cost us money though. But it's
the
fine.
library isn't really something that's of interest to someone on the other side of the country, let alone across the world.
Yeah,
And so it
exactly.
makes sense for this to be a totally separate thing. Where
Yeah.
we've talked about the library, but yes, if there's anyone in the area and you don't know this, then definitely check out herefordshireboardgamers.co.uk/library.
Yeah,
But
that was a reason I mentioned it. That was the first one I spun off, and then the other ones happened to fall in the case of actually this makes sense to have separate websites for separate purposes.
45 pages of games that you can borrow.
About
And
500 items to borrow. Yeah.
that's a fantastic resource for people who just want to try games and love trying new stuff. And yeah, because it can get ridiculously expensive.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
in a strange place where I actually get a large number of free games, and I design games, so in theory I could make a brand new game that never existed before by the end of the day, and it might even be fun to play, who knows. But most people don't have people who are keen to get their opinions on games. Most people don't have that ability, and being able to go somewhere until we get actual publicly funded, it becoming a mainstay of normal libraries. This is, frankly, this is something aspirational to look at.
It's a lot of work. I had a few people approach me who were considering doing something similar, and my first thing is it's a huge amount of work and a huge amount of space. We also supported 3 different warm rooms or warm spaces over winter. I think one still got some of our games now. So that's just a space where you can go and have something to eat, be warm, be social. and we lent packs of jigsaws and puzzles to those. So it's beyond individuals now; it's helping other communities, which is wonderful. And it's all a happy accident because of the pandemic. It was never our plan to do this. It's just one of those things that I see a problem, I can help, and I tend to run with stuff like that, which can be an issue.
Now, you've decided that on this main website, so for those who don't know, you've been running this for 7 years. You are one of the founders of the Herefordshire Games charity. Well, you're not registered as a charity yet, is that correct?
Yeah. So Herefordshire Boardgamers was found 2017 after 2 charity events. People went, oh, we like annual charity events. Can we play more regularly? So we formed, still with an ethos of charity and inclusion. And that's just kind of grown. It's going from just being me and a couple of my friends to having an organising team of 25 people, to us actually filling in the paperwork to become a charity in our own right. And from that, we've spun off into different sort of areas. So the convention, the library, the podcast. And one of the things we've always tried to do is share our knowledge. And that's been part of it. So it's like, well, what do we do? So the website you're looking at is, because we've got effectively 8 different projects, how can we help people find them? So our third website, and our new branding is Here for Games, to take us away from the link to a county, to make us more national or international. So maybe we're taken a little bit more seriously. And it also means that we can play on words, so Here for Games Con, Here for Games Knowledge, and just have a little bit of fun with it.
If you look at all the links, it's what are you here for? Are you here for the podcast? Are you here for inclusion? And it's obviously the knowledge that we're talking about today. And you've got these guides. There's a lot more coming. You can see that there's some blank areas. You're talking about accessibility and inclusion, the benefits of gaming, communities, events, families, and general stuff, as well as news and schools.
Yeah.
And
the school stuff is brand new. I was at KCON speaking to a number of teachers there, and talking about, well, I've got guides on general organisation. Do you have a place for schools, like where you can share knowledge or publish stuff? And I'm like, well, no. So it's still, you can see it's brand new, it's empty. But the idea is, I want to have an area where schools and after school clubs can share their knowledge, because often you'll end up writing guides on how to make it educational. That kind of stuff someone else can just reuse. So the idea is going to be, I can collate any information into a guide. There's also an accompanying Facebook and Discord group, and it's somewhere to bring school teachers or school organisers together to store knowledge. It's currently on 0. Hopefully it'll grow and more people will join. And that's why I've moved from Hereford to Hereford, to make this an international knowledge share as well. But yeah, now, unfortunately, it's on 0 right now.
A lot of this stuff is written by you, Ad, and there's a bit of editing, I guess, and help and inputs from other people. And from what you've said about collation, it seems like the eventual knowledge, because you can see this all started at the start of this year, pretty much.
Yeah, when I made a new website, this particular article exists on the original website, and it's a little bit hard to find. It's buried in amongst other stuff. So the posted date is when I copied across all the articles over. Most of them are some of them go back to when we started, like 6 years ago. So we've always been writing guides and articles, and I don't like repeating myself. And if I see the same question get asked 2 or 3 times on Facebook or any of the big groups, I will just write it up quickly, even if it's just a list. It's not graphically designed, it's not beautiful, but I will write a list and I will share it into that chat thread or the forum thread, and then I'll have a look and see what people are saying, and normally with their permission I'll go, that's a great idea, can I put it in the guide? And then it will grow. So I see them as living documents. Especially the list ones, I'll sneak in there often a couple of times a month and add a new bullet point in there.
And have you considered a wiki format, or do you think that you need to have one person doing the overall curation and editing?
That's a really big. I have not actually considered it. historically it has been me doing 99% of the work, so a wiki hasn't really been applicable. But I think there'll be certain areas where a multi-edited wiki would work really, really well. WordPress is very easy to use. You can give editors access, so that's not a problem. But that doesn't mean it's everyone. I hadn't even considered that. I've never really done much with wikis, ever. So that's not something that's on my radar, but that is now going on my list.
Okay.
That may well
And
help with collaboration. I like it.
what's so what made you want to share all this knowledge before we get into some of the individual articles?
Partly because I don't like repeating myself, and partly I don't know why. It's part of my identity to help people. I've always been the way. I've always tried to share what I know. When in my previous jobs, I've always fallen into sort of mentoring, coaching type roles. Even in my hobbies, I have. I have. I can find learning extremely difficult. So I am dyslexic, dyspraxic. So and introvert, whether that's a symptom or a cause, I don't know. But so I find physical learning extremely hard. I find socialization extremely hard. So and I am very empathetic because of that, or whatever. And so I can see other. So I'm very good at picking up how to do things better and how to help people. And so the ability just to collate knowledge, share knowledge, see problems. I think that's a dyslexic trait, just sort of to have the ability to flow chart and problem solve. And it's something I've literally always done. Every role I've ever had, even my jobs, I've ended up creating sort of knowledge articles or lists or training. It's just in my DNA. I love helping people. This is the biggest project I've done so far, though.
And I think that ultimately, once you've done something a few times, you do have a good sense of it. I mean, look, well, I'm not going to claim that I'm the best person in the world to give anyone advice about, streaming or making games, but both of those things are things that I've done a fair bit. I mean, heck, I could probably give you more advice about pole dancing or any form of dancing, even though I'm at best, I would say lower intermediate, maybe intermediate. Like, no, I'm lower intermediate, I would say. But, I'm a big step above a beginner, and that's the thing. You just need to be a step above your target audience, and then you're able to give them advice.
Yes, as long as you understand your limitations and don't overpromise,
Mm-mm.
absolutely. You only need to be better than the people you're teaching.
That's very true. But in this case, I think that you are basically expert. So let's go through some of the tips for running a game night. So step one is to prepare, advertise, set expectations, which I really like these reminders to tell people what's going to happen. Um, where you say, firstly, tell people what's going to be played. If there's a cost, then let them know. Otherwise, it might be worth saying, this is free. What's kind of food's available, and remind people that in this venue, you are allowed to bring your own food and drink, which it might be quite exciting. In this venue, you're expected to buy, but you can eat outside if you need to, or the cost of it, because be mindful of the cost. And this is really interesting. Step three, where you say, if possible, try and bring the same library of core games, because then people become familiar, people can teach new people, and that presumably allows you to then get other people to step up, to not just have a bunch of people teaching games every time, but building up a community where
And it's
you
really,
are.
yeah, it's lovely to see people. You teach them, and this person's been 3 times. On the fourth session, they're sat in a ring with 3 other beginners teaching Ticket to Ride, and that's lovely to see. And I'll step over and I'll go, if you need any help, I'm here, but you've got this. And I'll maybe hover nearby, not but let them have it. And it's wonderful seeing people grow confidence in the hobby. And I've seen it in as little as 2 or 3 sessions. People are then with coaching, with support, with the friendly community you set up. They're then starting to teach others and sharing it down with. And you know then that they could potentially borrow that, have a copy at home or borrow from my library, and be comfortable teaching their family, for example, or their friends. And it's just that growing of the hobby.
Yes, and allowing other people to become teachers. I think that I saw it yesterday where the person who owns Calico maybe wasn't 100% confident. One, two other people at the table had played it. I was the one newbie. And then the person who owned the game said, okay, I'll teach it, but if either of you to notice anything that I've missed, then please jump in. And being mindful of the teacher, of course, what their preferences are, because I think it's more often that the teacher will get maybe a little bit frustrated if someone jumps in and changes
Yes.
the flow. But sending out rules and stuff ahead of time, this doesn't mean that it needs to be an obligation for people to do it. And in fact, if you expect people to watch things ahead of time, it can be an accessibility barrier. But here, it's maybe another way that people can feel comfortable when they're about to come. All the time, I hear people saying, "Oh, is it okay? I don't know this game." And for the playtest afternoons, we laugh and say, well, none of us know this game except for the person teaching it. This is the first time it's been played in the world, so we are fine. But it does help people feel a little bit at ease. Is that your main idea here?
Yeah, we're not very good at this one actually. But yeah, so some people like to know what we play, so we always list what we've played to prior sessions, so people can get a feel for the type of games we play in our club. Often
Mm,
beginner to medium, just because we have a lot of new players, but there's no problem bringing anything heavier. So yeah, some people like to know in advance. Some people like to be aware of the rules. Some people feel disadvantaged if they are entering a game and they're the only player who hasn't read the rules. So it's just in the case of
mm,
you may want to, particularly if you're running a bigger game, just as part of the advert, include a link.
mm, mm, mm. And again, some people just like knowledge of what's happening. Some people need that knowledge to say, well, am I even able to attend? Will I be able to wheel myself into the loo?
Yep.
And if people aren't aware of that, then they'll kind of have to assume the worst, or they'll have to reach out and ask. And at the point that someone's reaching out, they feel already excluded, and it's not great. Um, again,
People
like,
have, we've had
sorry.
people with anxiety because we fundraise for Mind and we're clear about being friendly and inclusive. We have a lots of people with additional needs come to our events, and twice in not recently, but well, before we got really hot on this, and this is why we got hot on this, we had people reach the door of the building we were in, but weren't quite confident enough to enter. They just got overwhelmed. So it's like
Mm-mm,
we have next step. You'll see we'll have signposting all the way, but I've also spoken to them after, like, what could we have done to help? Well, if we can have a photo of the room empty, a photo of the room full of people, at least in their mind, they know if they're walking into a giant sports hall or a tiny dark bar, they can start to imagine how noisy it's going to be based on the sort of ratio of space. They're just, yeah, the venue photos can be massively important.
mm-mm. Yeah, getting an idea of what you're getting into can definitely ease anxiety quite a bit, because I think anxiety is quite often triggered by a sense of the unknown.
Yes.
And it's a mixture again of the unknown and reducing that, but also just having this utility of, hey, here's the map, here's where you can go, here's what to expect. If you're driving, there's going to be a limitation on how many cars can park at this point.
And
Um,
some of it is just efficiency. If I know that, yes, people can Google, for example, but actually, why should they? If I already have that information to hand, why would I not share it to make the guest's life easier? It's just
mm-mm.
simple stuff like that for me.
And what do you mean by a second private channel for information? What's the first private channel? So
Uh,
this one
Maybe that's
slightly
a bad phrasing. I'm thinking about there's probably is two factors. One is like people may not be comfortable asking in the public chat of a Facebook group. They might feel embarrassed to make sure that there is maybe it should be an alternative channel, an alternative private channel. So if people want to send you a message going, I have this specific need, am I okay to attend?
So
So maybe it's
basically,
probably a phrasing thing.
make sure that there's a private channel so that people can reach out via email or Facebook Messenger or a Discord private message or however it is.
Yeah.
And of course, if you are present on one of those things, it is unfortunately it becomes important to check all these things regularly. And I myself know that I'm sometimes guilty of making it quite a while without checking my Instagram messages, and then I don't see them all until then I end up replying quite late.
Yeah.
So, but especially if you've got something timely, it's important to do that. And photos of the organizers, so you just know, hey, if you're curious what Adam looks like, here's a photo of them. That's roughly what to expect. It's a profile shot, and you might not see Adam wearing a waistcoat and a red tie, but you will see someone who looks broadly like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, the photos and the code of conduct. Then we've got all the things about the night. And again, these are things, like you said, if you're having something catering for, if your ambition is to have 4 or 5 people over to your home, then maybe a lot of this is redundant. But you might still look at it and analyze, okay, what here is relevant to me? It can be challenging to have signs, but a greeter is such a nice thing when it's a public venue. And I think, especially if it's in a private setting, which can be super intimidating, it's important to sit them down, get them a cup of tea if they want, make sure that they've got some snacks, explain what's going on if they arrive late. But, and if it's in a bar, making sure that there's someone coming, because I've seen it so many times at other clubs where someone comes and then they look around and they don't quite get the attention that they're hoping for. They don't quite get a welcome because
Yeah.
everyone's already super engrossed in these long games.
It's the old sort of cowboy sort of thing where you walk into a bar, the piano stop, everyone turns and look at you, and then looks away again, and you're like, okay, do they even want me here? And unfortunately, that goes on a lot more than people think. From people I've spoken to, that still happens. And you don't necessarily need to have someone stood at the door the whole time, but you and your core committee must be willing to stand up within 30 seconds and just say to the people teaching bass, "Oh, take a break. I'll be back in a moment." And you need to get that person. We are getting a roller banner which says, please wait here if you need assistance. So at least there is if we're not present at the greeting area, there is a clear process of just wait here, we'll be with you momentarily.
Because people might want to play games themselves, and I think it's absolutely fine to be playing something. But as you say, it has to be something ideally where you can say, "Oh, hold on for a moment." Ideally, there should be one game where people can jump in or observe. And yes, Alex is 100% right. It's nice to have a table near the front with a drop in, drop out game running.
Yeah,
And
we have two ways of doing that. So for the first 45 minutes of any game night, there will always be a game like Just One, Codenames, Wavelength, where we can support drop in. They tend to be a little bit more social, a little bit more icebreaker, kind of to use like an industry term. And then for the bigger events, we have a thing called welcome games. We've selected 15 games which can be taught in 2 minutes and played in about no more than 15. So hamster roll, timelines, corridor. There's obviously a guide on it you can read. And the idea is for the large events, there will be a greeter there at all times. You can go there, play a round or two, let a couple more people come in, and then as a group, you can be kind of moved on to the next area, passed on to the demoers or the traders or whatever. So yes, definitely. I think you need both, but depend on the type of event you're doing. Do not start all your heavy games bang on time because people will be late. And if they walk in and they have a 45-minute or 2-hour wait to play a game, that's just rude.
I mean, you can start some of those heavier games,
Mm-hmm.
but there needs to be at least one table, I think, with people dropping in. And I
Definitely.
think that's something quite nice about a game about setting scenarios that people would do for different lengths of time, and a bunch of games that I've made without wanting to blow my own horn too much,
Yes,
but
there's two.
just a wee bit.
Yes, yours would definitely work on the welcome area with just throw a new person in.
Um, Now, you talk about matching the games to the people, and this is really important. I mean, at the start, we talked about Root, where they are, it's not just about how Alex says, sure, just join the table playing the third round of Twilight Imperium 4th edition. Yeah, that would be a bad welcome. It's important to think about this onboarding, and in the same way that a game designer needs to think about the first time play experience, a group designer, you are doing social design. You need to think about that first attendee experience. And competition can vary in so many different ways. And when you say overly competitive, it might be that your stuff gets broken, or it might be that you've got people targeting individuals like in Root. Or conversely, it might be that we are showing off in a way that makes me feel stupid as a player, where I feel like, oh wow, I'm failing in a very public way. And right now, I mean, personally, having played literally thousands of different games, I'm probably going to understand the game faster than most. And secondly, having played so many games, I maybe have less ego invested in any individual one. And I've learned to rely on the fact that to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to play this and I'm just going to play it making the first decision that I make, and I'll go with it. And if I mess up, that's totally fine. But I think that some people can, it's a big fear for lots of people. Just, I don't want to play this. I don't want to look stupid.
Yeah, I find that the few times that we see people upset at our events, and in most cases, it's people who are angry at themselves for making a mistake, or if I'd have done that turn, I could have won, or I'm now going to lose because I didn't do that. It's people's own expectations are the biggest barrier in a lot of cases. And yes, if you teach badly, maybe they didn't pick up that rule, but you've also got to be kind on the games teacher and the person trying to learn the game. It's very difficult.
And then you talk about gauging the complexity for people, gauging whether they need certain extroversion or social skills or lying or bluffing that might make people feel uncomfortable. Having rules change too much might give people anxiety. And then you talk about avoiding house rules, which I'd absolutely agree with. You say if they are necessary, make them very clear, 100%. And can you give any examples of when they might be necessary?
Oh yeah, of course. So one thing I see myself as an ambassador for the game designer. If I have a game I've played, I think I don't like that rule, I'm going to change it. I'm potentially doing a massive disservice to the game designer and representing their game incorrectly. It's one of the reasons why I don't like house rules. One of the house rules I tend to do tend to be usability. So there are some games which say once stuff's in the discard pile, you may never, ever, ever, ever look at it. I'm like, well, I've got good memory. That advantages me, but I know some of the players on the table haven't got a great memory, and they've asked if they can have a quick look at their own personal discard pile, which is only 4 cards. Of course you can. No one cares. So it's that kind of. It's more for me. It's more sort of usability or accessibility house rules rather than everyone starts with 27 gold pieces because I think it's a good idea.
I mean, there's a whole discussion on hidden trackable information. If something is something that you learnt during the game, and in theory you could have remembered it, but then it goes behind the screen, who's that benefiting? I mean, in some sense, if a game is then going to become too analytical because you put all that hidden trackable information in the front, then it could bog it down, it could make it overly complex, it could lead to analysis paralysis. But at the same time, it does mean that those people with worse memory are able to engage in the same decision space.
The opposite is true. If you're trying to maintain how Keyflower, for example, have you got 2 yellow meeples or 3 yellow meeples, and you're spending 5 minutes on to memorize everyone's positions, you can get analysis paralysis from people trying to do the right thing. It's something you need to agree as a table. Are we okay with allowing an exception in this
Keyflower that I
case?
saw the video about, funnily enough.
Yeah, I love it. I've not played in a long time, but there are lots of games with hidden information. It's up to you to judge, am I going to break the game experience for the majority? There was a debate on board game trading in chat asking about someone who they could they're playing a heavy euro and they want to write down their next couple of moves because they will forget by the time it comes back around to them. And
Yeah,
on the whole, people were very chill, but a few people were quite anti. It's like, well, that's
yeah.
cheating. It's like, well, no, that's not giving them an advantage. It's reducing a disadvantage for them. They might have memory issues. They might have attention issues,
Mm-mm.
and it'll probably speed the game up if they don't have to replan their turn every time. But that was quite an interesting debate, an eye-opening one on inclusion. And I got a little bit loud about inclusion on that thread. And yeah, if it's not in the rules, do it. But actually, if you want to take notes because your memory's not so good, as long as it's not absolutely forbidden, and in some games it is, some games do say no notes are allowed, then do it.
I mean, even on the upper levels, I've seen games where, there are games that are being played for, tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars because, we live in an American centric society, hence why I don't say pounds. But even there, they say in the official tournaments rules, it's all about, yes, if you want to make notes, then you are allowed to do this because this makes sense and it's part of the game design that you shouldn't be giving people the information of every single card in a deck to track. I mean, obviously, if you were to do that, then shuffle the deck afterwards. But giving people the information of a small number of cards, like the top four cards of your deck that's coming out, well, that seems reasonable. Or if you know the top cards of someone else's deck, well, that gives you little bits of information and it keeps the uncertainty alive. And frankly, if the game is going to not be good, this might sound harsh to designers, but if the game's not going to be good with note taking, then it's not going to be good with perfect memory. So maybe you need to look at your game design again. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that. Alex in the comments says, I think house rules are fine as long as it's clearly communicated that's what you're doing, and the group is happy to play that way.
Agreed. Just be a bit more careful if you've got beginners because they'll go, oh, okay, random example again. Oh, okay, the game says we start with 10 coins. We like starting with 27. And the beginner goes, well, okay. But my problem is you're giving a disservice to the people who design the games who know that 10 coins leads to an element of competition or tightness or whatever. But yeah, as long as you all agree and potentially explain it. My worry is if you've got someone totally new, they lack the context to understand why a house rule exists, and then you start talking about the meta of the game before you've even taught it, and it all becomes a bit awkward and funny.
Mm. I mean, yeah, you talk about game teaching, which is the next tip of being patient, enthusiastic, and welcoming. And do you think it's appropriate to talk about a little bit of strategy, like in a game about auctioning cubes after winning an auction to become the auctioneer? I think I might, if I were to demo that at a convention, I might say, by the way, just to let you know, this game can be mean. You can lock yourself out if you spend too much money.
This is a huge debate: is should you teach a rule and let the beginners discover everything for themselves, or should you offer basic strategy advice? I lean towards strategy advice. I also do teach sequentially, so I won't teach all the rules. So just give an example, I don't know, something like Agricola, where you look at the action spaces and half of them are not even valid right now. You can't
Mm-hmm.
harvest crops because you haven't planted them yet. You can't build, you've got no wood. So if I'm teaching someone, I can go, actually, here are the different spaces you could choose, but you can ignore these 5. You don't have the prerequisites yet, or you don't have the materials. So maybe on your first turn, pick from one of these 4. That level of strategy advice is just fine. You're almost like giving people a focus on what they should be doing.
It's
Uh,
getting the game going faster.
Yeah, and I don't think that's strategy advice. I just think that's ruling out really, really bad options. And in some cases, they're either bad or they're just impossible. What I will tend to do is I would then dial it back a little bit, but I would normally give the players an idea. It's like, from our experiences, there are some better options and there are some weaker
Mm-mm.
options. If you'd like some advice at any time about what we would do, you can ask. But you certainly want to let the players discover it for themselves, but you also don't want them to be completely stuck and bamboozled and feeling out of it. It's an interesting one.
I mean,
We
sorry, carry on.
no, done.
I was going to say, my latest game that I played tested twice yesterday, I've played so many times and I've still never won it, which is quite funny because I really enjoy auctions. But it is a game I'm proud to have made. And the second time we played it yesterday, the reason I lost was partially because I left its fixed currency, if you know what I mean. So you don't get to make change ever. And you start off with 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7. And I left myself with just the 7. And then you have to bid at least one card in every blind auction. And so I had to overbid. And I ended up actually losing money where I should have gained money. And then that set me up badly for the rest of the game. So I enjoy and am kind of entertained by that sort of, oh no, I did a terrible thing. Ah well, it's now I get to experience all the repercussions. But I think it takes a weird type of person to be that masochistic. I think that most people enjoy having a bit more information ahead of time so they maybe don't fall into those traps.
Yeah, and if you're in last place and you're falling further behind, that can be not fun.
Mm.
And the hardest one strategy wise, I'll give an example. I was taught Eclipse, which is a big
Mm-mm.
heavy space game, and opportunity to buy some technologies. And I think in the first edition, there were some technologies which were clearly better. And the teacher said to me, just buy something, it's fine. And I just read the description, not having been actually I was taught the game, but you didn't know what engines are or guns or how big fights are. And there's limited technologies, and maybe like something like photon torpedoes, something like that. And there's only two of them, and I didn't buy them. The two experienced players immediately bought both of them. I was like, I feel I've made a mistake right now. And that's the point where if something a bit more subtle about like a technology track where some items are clearly better, should you pause and go, actually, you can buy any one of these, but these 5 are generally better. That's a much harder decision to make because
Mm-mm.
I felt like I partly lost a game because I made a couple of misunderstandings as a newer player, not understanding the importance of rolling the extra dice in battle, for example.
And I know there are some people like my friend Xate who doesn't want any strategy advice. And so I think it's important to be mindful and say, hey, do you mind some early advice? And I've actually found the response can go all over the spectrum. Some people
Yes.
say, yes, please, and be really excited by that. Some people say, oh, no, no, let me work it out myself. Some people are like, oh, I don't know. It depends what kind of advice you want to give.
I think that's the best way of doing it. You can say something along the lines of, your technology purposes are expensive and permanent. They can be quite important. Would you like some advice?
Mm-mm.
And that's it, just full stop.
There's a lot of advice here about appropriate lighting, space to move around the tables, controlling the noise if you can. I mean, personally, I love background music, and if it's in my house, I will ask people if they have preferences, but will typically have something ambient going on, maybe instrumental. Um, and again, this is all about being mindful of the people. If people are coming over to my place, then you can assume that I already have some awareness of who these people are. But if you're running something as a game group and you're trying to get more people to come up, that's a completely different scenario where we're trying. I mean, that's more akin to the Friday daytime playtests, where we try to make it welcoming so that someone can see it on Meetup and jump in. And that's fantastic. I mean, yes, Friday daytime playtests are a completely different objective to me running a Tuesday night, everyone coming over, and I will make dinner for you and playtest some games. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, definitely.
Um, Patience and tolerance, yes, 100%. Making sure that it's clear who the staff are, who the main people are. And I think part of that, if you are going to wave and show photos of yourself, like on Friday daytime playtests, we say, yes, Bez will be wearing red. And if I'm not there, then Ellie and David will typically show photos of themselves. Um, Name stickers is a great idea, and we don't personally do that. But I have found that some people also feel uncomfortable with stickering, and all of these are like, what do you feel comfortable bringing? What are you able to bring? And yeah, flags for player matching, and be aware. This is number 13. This is the most important thing, because just be aware of looking at that data in a um, analytical, open-minded way, I guess.
Yeah.
And
That shows
um,
if you refresh the page, the typos will magically go away because I've been edited them while talking. That should be aware of sarcasm. That's a very common thing. Lots of people have very dry humor, and that's all well and good unless you've got an autistic person on the table with you who could either not get it or be confused or even be isolated by overt sarcasm. And one time I've had to actually tell someone off recently. They were giving really bad strategy advice, like um, telling people, oh, jokingly, yeah, attack that person. That's a really good idea. And I'm like, just to pause, two of the five people around the table are quite high on the autistic spectrum, and they may not get that you're joking. Do you mind not joking, please? And the person was like, oh, fudge, I didn't realize that, and was super apologetic. But it can be second nature just to give a bit of banter, but it could be highly inappropriate.
yes, I mean, again, I'm assuming that Alex isn't actually going to bring sound panels to game events, as amusing as it is. And, it's always where, and but to lots of these things, I kind of assume that Alex is pondering it maybe for 30 seconds before dismissing it. That's what I assume with that kind of comment. I personally absolutely lie so much when playing games. And I always tell people, just to tell you all, yeah, this is a game where you can lie. And I'm going to make the timeout signal if I'm telling you the truth and actually giving you good advice. But otherwise, assume that I'm being entirely self serving. So sometimes stating that up front with those types of games can be useful.
Yeah, teaching traitor games is so difficult. I have to say, games master mode. Here are the rules. Here is a scenario that might happen. So I taught New Angeles on Saturday, and there's a lot of sort of backstabbing and greediness in that. And I taught Feed the Kraken on Thursday, and I love traitor games, but you trying to teach them is so difficult. You're also automatically the target of every single attack as well, which is really fun.
Ah, yes. That's why I find that this sort of signal, just making the timeout signal, is a useful thing. And I do tell people, just to let you know, when I'm making this signal, I am giving you the best information to the best of my knowledge and ability.
I like
But
that. That's going on my list as well.
and it means that I can say, by the way, this is genuinely a good thing for you to do. Um, um, and then you talk about the growth, because not everyone wants their game group to grow. And the truth is, for Friday daytime playtests, because it's in a public area and it's in the National Theatre, it used to be in Royal Festival Hall, we don't have exclusive use of the space. Of course we don't. There's a whole bunch of people using the same space for working on their laptops or whatever. And once there's more than 12 of us, it feels like we're starting to take over the venue a little bit. So we are in a weird position where if there's 5 of us, we feel like, oh, this is a bit awkward. We'd prefer there to be more. But now we're generally always in a good space where there's 9 to 12 ish. And we're happy to have this many people. But if it started to get to typically 16, then we'd start to worry, okay, are we taking over too much? But for the most part, if you are lucky enough to have a venue that can keep taking more people, then yeah, you need to keep growing. But it's also about not just growing in terms of numbers, but growing in terms of quality, which is really interesting how this whole section talks mainly about the latter.
Yeah, I'm going to add a fifth one in there now. Don't try and run. Grow slowly.
Mm-mm. So you've talked about, yeah, grow and the culture to be friendly, inclusive, and welcoming. Ask for feedback. I think this is the main thing that we've said. Like, be introspective, look at yourself, think about what you're doing, and allow other people to step up and be involved. Um, and if someone is interested in running some stuff or setting up the day, then allow them to do that. And sometimes people are just going to say, you know what, this isn't for me. And that's okay, because you can't, nothing is for everyone.
Yeah.
And this, I'm aware that we've been talking for more than an hour, but there's so much to unpack here. This has been a fantastic guide. And before we start wrapping up, I think it's worth showing this graphic that you made for power and privilege, where we talk.
Didn't make that one, unfortunately.
Sorry, thank you for correcting me. I do apologize. So that is by Sylvia Duckworth, who I understand drew it. And
Yeah.
So the idea here is to remember that even if you are marginalized on some of these axes, you might be privileged on some of the other ones. I mean, frankly, yes, I do come from a middle class background, and yeah, I've never had to worry really about being homeless, which is amazing. And yeah, talking about I'm relatively physically healthy, so yeah, I've got definitely a lot of privileges that aren't open to everyone. And yeah, again, like citizenship, I am a citizen of the UK. I was born here, I've got a British passport, and whilst post Brexit, it's not maybe as useful as a French passport. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But, you know, it's still pretty gosh darn awesome having a British passport. And I hear about the poor Americans, the US folk, I should say, who have to keep paying taxes, which sounds like a terrible system, even when they're living elsewhere.
The background on these two is the last two documents we've created. It helps I have a really good employer who actually would let me borrow some of their materials. So some of it is materials I borrowed from my workplace, and some I've tweaked to make them more game specific. There is two documents, allyship and privilege, which is mostly about stepping up and being active to support other people who may need it. And there are some tips on also how to, the next slide is brilliant, calling in and calling out, how to hit the pause button. If you hear something bad, how to stop it, how to interrupt it, because that person may not realize. And it's hard, it's very hard to stop and step up, and you might feel like you're going to cause confrontation, but equally, we need to protect people. And it could even be just a joke with a very blue or off misaligned humor points. And those like, actually, please don't make those sort of jokes. They're not funny, and they're not our culture. And then the other one is gender inclusive language, and that's also pronouns, and it's also about stereotypes as well. So if someone presenting as a female walked into your games night, would they be treated differently? Would they be pointed at certain games? Would they be mansplained to? That kind of stuff. And also, would they feel comfortable walking into one of your game nights? And the next document I'm writing is on inclusive language, so that will take this and include age, race, disability, social background, and so forth. And it's just a way of taking our general guide and just trying to make them a bit more specific. Because they're a gamer guide, there are some practical actions that we are promising to do as a group, and hoping that other people will agree to as well.
And one thing I do love from USA is the word "y'all,"
yes,
which you've got
I
here.
write that.
Yes, I just think it, and in Scotland, even though it's not technically correct in terms of the Queen's English, you have a third person plural use. And what's her use doing?
That's really good.
But I've never heard that outside of Scotland.
No, that makes sense. I'm very happy to come back on if we want to speak specifically about those next few documents. And if people want to know more, I will be hosting an online session about those gender and allyship as part of our convention, our online convention. So they will. So if people want to hop on and chat, and it's very much a knowledge share. So here's what we've got. Tell us more. We can incorporate into our guide. And I'll also be hosting a general board game organizer chat at both Aircon and Expo as well, which for me is utterly terrifying.
Do you have the times for that?
Vaguely, yes. Yeah. So it's Friday, 4 o'clock at Aircon, and I think it is Sunday, 2 o'clock at the UK Games Expo. And it's just a chance to chat and meet other. Those are both general organizer sessions. Come along, chat, share your problems, share your knowledge, and just meet other organizers.
I mean, annoyingly, the Aircon one is just before the trading hours finish, so I don't think, and not having to take care of the stands, I don't think I'll be able to make it. But I do encourage other folk to go along if you're at Aircon. And the UK Games Expo, I mean, Sunday, 2 p.m. I'm really sorry, but I can't encourage people to go there. Yes, exactly, Alex. You know it's the clash of the 2 p.m. events.
Yeah, you can always come on later, but yeah, we're trying to fight for a room, and relatively knowledge sharing is important. But when you've got publishers and game designers and wanting to do panels and podcasts, we're having to punch for a little bit of space to talk. But they have both been very supportive.
No, it is a fantastic thing that you're doing, and you know what their name, Matt, doing the PhD, doing the you must know this person.
It's never. There's a couple of. I've spoken to a couple of students who are doing a PhD on gaming or gaming in community, and yeah, I'm very happy to speak to anyone about that as well.
But it feels like a wonderful thing that you're trying to share this knowledge. And my question to you is, in the year, let's look ahead 2 years, 2025, where would you like this to be? How would you like things to change? And what would you like this knowledge base to look like?
I'd like it to be branded with a logo to start with, but that's a different problem. What I would really like, and I've said it to my team, and it happens now, is if somebody goes on to pretty much anywhere on the internet and goes, I'm starting a games night, I want to run a charity event, what I would love is for Here for Games knowledge to be shared immediately. Go here, they have the answers, or at least they will help you. To be to be almost a first stop of advice for the gaming scene would be wonderful. And from there, I would love every gaming session to be that a little bit more friendly, that little bit more inclusive. So those people who are marginalized, who might be socially excluded, will feel welcome and come along, because you sometimes only have one chance to make a first impression. And if you are the club that turns off gaming for that one individual forever, and I'm not even exaggerating, this can happen. You possibly cost that person an amazing social hobby, a friendship group, and all sorts.
And Alex says, so happy you're able to share this. Yes, 100%.
If anyone wants to join me, I am trying to grow an international team of people who will help write and collate and share and bring people in, help write the schools knowledge guides and all that stuff. It's very much, I want to grow this. It's going to be a slow process. I don't expect it to get big overnight, but yeah, it's not something that I can do alone, because I don't have the experiences. I'm not a teacher. So I need to find people who have their specialist knowledge, who are happy to be proactive and share and jump on board.
And if people want to share their own articles, then presumably they retain the rights to their own writing, and it's just giving you the permission to share that via your website.
Yeah, we can always just have one thing I want is just a page of links. So if there were good articles already, there's no need to recreate them. We just said, here are a bunch of other resources, go and find them. But equally, if we host them, that might help with traffic anyway. But yeah, we're not trying to claim glory or anything like that. We just want the knowledge to be easy to find.
And this is fantastic. And as a designer, when I recently went to the Reddit thread for board game design, I was really impressed with one particular individual who seems to have made it their task to have a massive collection of links to say, hey, if you're making a CCG, here are some great links. Hey, if you're
Oh,
making your first game, here are some great links.
could you share
And
that with me, please? Because I've purposely excluded board game organizers from our knowledge sharing because that's not our remit. But I want to have a single thread which says, if you're a board game designer, we don't intend to help you, but here's people who can. And that's so we can still help, but I don't want to lose focus on communities. So if you do have any links to the board game industry, to the different Facebook groups, the design groups, I would love just to have a big list that we can put on our website. So that would be, yeah, if you could share that, that'd be brilliant.
yes, please remind me if I don't.
I will
And
do.
um, so I've shared the link below, which is definitely worth checking out. At this point, we've chatted a lot. I've asked you lots of questions. And Adam, what would you like to ask me and potentially anyone watching? Question
I'm
of the
gonna
day.
keep I'm
Question
gonna
of the
keep it.
day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day.
I think it's going to be board game advice for new people. So you're trying to entice a new person into the hobby. What would you say to them?
Entice a new person into the hobby. Um, I guess I would say, firstly, that games have become better at becoming shorter. I'd ask them, well, if it was a one to one conversation, I'd ask them what games they're familiar with or what games they have enjoyed. And then I'd ask them if there was anything they didn't like about those games. And so I tried to find a game that was a perfect match for them. I think, yes, I would tell them that games have moved on massively since the stuff that's been made, even in the last 40, 50 years, and that it's practically like films, in that if you watch a film from 50 years ago, then it feels a little bit quaint by today's standards, whereas we're still playing this game that was 110 years old now, I believe.
Yep.
And Monopoly is still most people's, that's what I'm thinking of. I think that I would say, hey, if you love making deals, then this is a good game. And I think it's been trotted out so many times, but I think the key thing is to get that balance of saying, yes, games have moved on, but it's not that those old games are bad, because there's a lot of brilliant historical games. I mean, Go, I think, is still a classic, and even Senate, I mean, the oldest game that we have any idea of how to play, is seems like it's got a bit of fun to be had. But there's no denying that games with have a better mix of agency, drama, and getting to the core of things, facilitating a social experience. And just as psychology has improved and we've better been able to understand humans, I mean, look at how we've developed a greater understanding of mental health. Similarly, we've been able to better understand how people at the table will be able to respond. And I think just in the past 20 years, the amount of language that has been granted to designers by Jeff Engelstein and Isaac Shalev, and I mean, frankly, the people on Decision Space podcast, that's been massive for me as a designer to be able to talk about the size and the texture. And whilst that's not something I would expect a gamer to understand or familiarize themselves with, it is something that then results in better games for anyone playing. And you don't need to be a gamer to play games. You don't need to say, this is going to be my thing. And you don't need to play complex games. You don't need to play Euro games. You can play, just social party games, and you are a gamer. It's for everyone. I strongly believe that there is a game for everyone.
Yep, you couldn't have said it better. Games are a lot shorter. They know when to finish, and they have a lot more choices than they used to. And there is definitely a game for everyone.
I mean, you're clearly a lot more succinct. I mean, I could not write a short list like you've done. At this point, I want to say over to you. What are you up to? You can share what's if you want to. I will be heading out of the house in 10 minutes. I've got a wee appointment with the doctor. I am going to be doing, hopefully, receiving a package around 4 o'clock of 250 new games, which I'm quite excited about. By which I mean free 250 copies of three different games, like 100 of 250 of the other. So that's going to be something that I'm able to sell at Aircon. And yeah, I might have a little think about what I'm actually wearing at Aircon, start planning and doing a wee bit of the packing. But I'm also going to make sure that I get out. Mondays are, in theory, my get out of the house for a few hours day, and there's a pub event that lasts until 7 o'clock. So sadly, I do need to be in the house until at least 4, but after that, I'm going to be heading out for a couple of hours. So it's an mixture of enjoyment and stuff to progress with. So I'm quite looking forward to all of that. How about you? Is there something you need to do, something you want to do? Please share. I promise I care.
So all of my focus right now is a little bit on Aircon, but our annual charity games convention is in more or less 2 months. So we're very much getting that organised, contacting, begging for prizes, trying to see if anyone wants to run or exhibit or do anything. It's our 9th year in person. This year it's now called Herefordshire Gamescon. We've had a rebranding, and we went online during the pandemic, so we ran it to we never stopped. And then last year we ran it both online and in person at the same time, and that was actually a bad idea. But I still believe there is still a space for online gaming. There aren't many online conventions left. We've got friends all around the world who jump on and play with us because we still meet online twice a month. So we are starting a brand new online game convention called Hereford Games Conline. And it's going to be quite small this year, but my intention is to grow it because I think there is definitely a space for it. Even though most people have stopped doing their online conventions, we're going to start one because we'd like to be different, and I think it's a chance of people who can't leave the house, can't travel, to come play games, meet people.
Just to clarify, so the previously known Mega May charity event is now just known as Hereford Games Con. Is that correct?
Yeah, Hereford Games Con is a new name of what used to be Mega May. Yeah.
Okay, and the Hereford Games Conline, when is that going to be? And what are the dates for? So everyone watching can be like, oh, maybe I could go to Hereford.
Yeah, so the in person, it is the end of Mental Health Awareness Week, 2 weeks before the Games Expo. So it is the 12th to 14th of May, from Friday through Sunday. Closing times are debatable because it's a private venue that we have control over, and it is completely free, very much focused on open gaming and beginners. So it should be, and it's very, very friendly and as accessible as we can make it. And then Conline is approximately 2 weeks before. We are aiming for like the weekend, which I think happens to be the coronation. But we are very happy if anyone wants to run something like the Wednesday before or roughly in May, then just do it. That's the whole point of online. We don't have to necessarily wait for the weekend. So it's 12th to 14th of May for in person, and roughly the weekend of the 5th of May, about 2 weeks before.
So that will be 28th to 30th of April.
No, I think it is the 5th. It might be the week before actually. The date is still somewhat flexible but it's going to be 2 weeks before the convention. So the end of April through to the 12th of May is Conline, possibly featuring most of the stuff on a single weekend.
Well, that sounds fantastic, and I do agree that having them both at the same time, it's kind of splitting attention. So I think doing them both at different times makes a lot of sense. And I will definitely be at the Hereford Games Con, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So at this point, let's recap and wrap up before we finish up. So we talked about quite a bit. We talked about the nature of best practices, reminding people that all of this stuff is different for everybody who joins in. We talked about Growl and Gloomhaven and Root, Calico, Prototypes, the Mega May charity event, now known as Hereford Games Con. Um, Thinking about the community and the support, such a brilliant thing. Talking about how data breeds knowledge, breeds hopefully the wisdom to determine which actions you should do. Thinking about whether there's a problem and understanding that even if it isn't a big problem, maybe it's a shortcoming, something that could be improved. Having drop in, drop out games, whether to give people strategy advice. I mean, the key thing is to be mindful and to just ask them up front, hey, would you like some strategy advice? Sharing this knowledge in Aircon Friday 4 p.m. and UK Games Expo Sunday 2 p.m. and making sure that you're super friendly and thinking about how new people are going to come in. We talked about doctor's appointments, focusing on your upcoming conventions. I mean, I'm also need to focus on my yeah leaving party, and I'm excited to have Ad over there joining us. And yeah, there's not much else to say at this point other than if you want to check me out, I am obviously Stuff by Bez in all of the places. And tomorrow is going to be a quick solo show. And Wednesday, I will be talking about sealed bid auctions with Alan Paul. And then over the weekend, I'll just be doing some very quick um, yeah, 5 minute things to give you a walk around of aircon. So if you're not at aircon, then you'll be able to get quick 5 minute videos of what aircon looks like at 10 a.m. And thank you very much, everyone. Most importantly, thank you, Ad, for being here. And if people would like to find you, where do you like to be found?
Games is the hub. From there, you should be able to find us. Please do reach out, join us, come play online games with us. And yeah, if we'd love people to help with our projects. We are passionate about giving back, and I would really love feedback, volunteers, whatever. Just get involved.
Well, lots of love to you all. And for now, the only thing left to say is bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for so long. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for so long. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.